short time in God's Word. Today, April 9th, we are in 1 Samuel, and we know, if you've been around the Bible a little bit, you know a lot of what's happening here in 1 Samuel, and it begins with someone who's not able to have a child, and she's pleading with the Lord for years, really. And finally, God gives her a child, and that child is Samuel, and Hannah has given him over to the Lord. And so she does that, and then we get to chapter 3, and Samuel is still young. Eli, the priest, his household's a mess. And so it says in chapter 3, the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. Now, the way that it worked was the prophet of God would get messages from God to give to the people, and it's telling us here that that wasn't happening. It says, at that time Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. So Eli's physical sight is representative of his spiritual sight, and it was lacking. And so the Lord called Samuel, and he said, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." And he said, "No, I didn't call you. Lie down again." So he went and lay down, and the Lord called again, "Samuel." And Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." He said, "I did not call you. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Right? He's just he's new to all this. The Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Only took 3 times. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And so it happens, right? God speaks again. And Samuel says, "Speak, for your servant hears," and he gives him the message. And then Samuel doesn't want to give the message. Why? Because it's a message against Eli and his household. And eventually he gives him the message, and Samuel realizes that's the Lord. And the process then of this transition continues in verse 19. Samuel grew, the Lord was with him, and that none of his words fall to the ground. And from Israel, all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as a prophet of the Lord. Right? And so there's this ongoing growth, if you will, and recognition that God was working through Samuel. We read a book last year called Whisper, and it was about hearing from the Lord, and there's various ways, and some say controversially various ways, but hey, your main source today is God's Word. That's where you should be regularly diving into, reading, and listening for God to speak. God works through circumstances, through open doors, closed doors, sometimes through other people. Right? There's different ways that God speaks. There's a deep peace sometimes you go, I just think this is what I'm supposed to do. And you start moving on that direction and trust that if it's not, God will redirect you. How do all these things work? Well, there's a relation here that we can pick up on, or a correlation, or is the growing relationship with Samuel to God, right? And God to Samuel, and his understanding of who God is and responding to him. And I think that's instructive for us, is to have eyes to see, right? And so read God's Word, listen for God's voice as you read, as you think about these things, and recognize that, and you can't do it unless God reveals it, right? Otherwise you're just going to read and be like, oh, it's just a book. No, ask God to help you to see, to give you eyes to see and ears to hear. Till next time, keep growing little by little.